A mother's love is supposed to protect, to nurture. But what happens when that bond is shattered by desperation or greed? In a heartbreaking and unthinkable act, a mother sold her own 5-year-old daughter for just $200. Within 24 hours, the little girl was gone forever. What led to this horrifying decision? Who was the buyer? And what really happened in those crucial last hours? Tonight, we uncover the chilling details of a story that has left an entire community shaken. A child, innocent and full of life, was betrayed by the very person meant to keep her safe. As we piece together the events leading up to this tragic end, one question lingers: was there any chance to save her? Stay with us as we take you through the devastating truth behind this case and the heartbreaking reality that no child should ever have to face. The small town where this tragedy unfolded is still struggling to understand how something so horrific could happen. Neighbors remember the mother as quiet, someone who mostly kept to herself. But behind closed doors, was there a hidden desperation? Was she forced into this decision, or was it something far more sinister? Those who knew the little girl describe her as full of energy, always smiling, always eager to play. She had no idea that the person she trusted most would hand her over to a stranger. But who was this buyer? And why would someone pay for a child in such a way? The transaction happened quickly, no questions, no hesitation. Just $200 exchanged for a life. Within hours, the little girl vanished, and by the next day, she was gone forever. But what really happened in those missing hours? And could someone have stopped it before it was too late? As the investigation unfolded, more details began to surface, but they only raised more questions. The mother, now in custody, remained mostly silent, her reasons unclear. Was it poverty? Was it desperation? Or something darker? Some of the neighbors speculated that she had been struggling for months, unable to find steady work, and that the money would have been a lifeline, no matter the cost. But others couldn't understand how a mother could betray her child like this, especially for such a small amount. Was there more to this than just financial hardship? Was there someone behind the scenes, manipulating her? Meanwhile, the buyer remained a mystery, disappearing without a trace after the girl's death. Who would purchase a child? And why was it so easy for this transaction to happen in the first place? There were whispers about underground networks, about people willing to exploit the most vulnerable, but no one could confirm anything for certain. The police began digging deeper, retracing every step the mother had taken in the days before her daughter's death. It seemed almost too easy, how quickly she had agreed to the sale, how fast the deal had been made, as though there was something more at play. Could someone have coerced her into making this choice? Could she have been manipulated into believing that this was the only way out? With every new piece of information, the truth seemed further out of reach, and as the clock ticked, the tragic outcome remained etched in everyone's minds. A child's life cut short, her innocence stolen in the blink of an eye. What was the real story behind her death? Who was truly to blame for what had happened? The days that followed were filled with mounting pressure as the authorities searched for answers. They found traces of the mother's footsteps everywhere, except, oddly, at the scene where the transaction had supposedly taken place. Surveillance footage from nearby cameras showed nothing unusual. No car pulling up, no shadowy figure, just an empty street. It didn't add up. Investigators began to piece together the mother's movements from days before. There were phone calls she had made, texts she had sent, but they were vague, too vague to offer much insight. She'd even visited a local pawn shop days before the sale, asking about items she could sell. It wasn't the act of a desperate person trying to get by. It felt calculated, cold, almost like she was preparing for something. But what? A chilling breakthrough came when the police traced a bank transaction made in her name. It led to a location far from the town, a secluded area that no one in the small community had ever heard of. The thought that someone might have been pulling the strings from a distance, someone much more powerful, began to take hold. Was the mother just a pawn in a much darker scheme? Then, just as the investigation seemed to be running in circles, a tip came in. A witness reported seeing a van, strange, unmarked, parked outside the mother's house around the time of the girl's disappearance. The driver? A man with a familiar face, someone who had been seen in town on several occasions. A person who, until now, had flown completely under the radar. The moment the police connected his name to the case, the entire investigation took a sharp turn. The man was known to have connections, not just locally, but with networks that had ties to human trafficking. It was a chilling revelation. Could the mother have been involved in something far beyond just financial desperation? As everything started to fall into place, the pieces seemed to tell a much darker story than anyone had anticipated. But no one knew yet if they could uncover the truth in time, or if the people behind this would go to even greater lengths to keep it hidden. The clock was ticking, and the end of this story felt as far away as ever. Just as the investigation seemed to be gaining momentum, a shocking second twist emerged that none could have predicted. The man linked to the trafficking network wasn't acting alone. In a stunning turn of events, it was revealed that someone very close to the mother, someone she had trusted her entire life, was actually involved. The shocking truth: her own sister, the child's aunt. The police had never suspected her. She had been an almost invisible presence in the investigation, maintaining a quiet distance. But as they dug deeper, they discovered unsettling evidence: bank records, phone calls, and emails pointing to the aunt's involvement in arranging the sale. She had been the one to introduce the mother to the buyer, knowing full well what would happen. The question was, why? What could have possibly driven her to betray her own blood like this? The shockwaves rippled through the community. How had a trusted family member turned into a key player in such a horrific crime? Was the aunt also a victim of manipulation, or was she the mastermind behind it all? Her motive was still unclear, but as the investigation team grew closer to finding her, another unsettling detail came to light. The buyer, the person who had paid for the little girl, wasn't just involved in trafficking. He was connected to a larger network of organized crime, with ties to both local and international rings. The aunt's involvement deepened the mystery, and the stakes soared higher. Was this crime a one-time deal, or was it part of a larger, far-reaching conspiracy? Could the entire town have been living under the shadow of this secret, unaware that there were people in their midst willing to do anything for money? And with the authorities closing in, would those responsible go to even greater lengths to cover their tracks? The pieces of the puzzle were finally falling into place, but the more they discovered, the darker and more dangerous the truth became. Time was running out, and with every passing moment, the question loomed: who could be trusted, and who was still hiding their true role in this unimaginable tragedy? The final revelation was coming, but at what cost? The truth finally began to unravel when the police tracked down the aunt. She was apprehended in a small, run-down motel, looking completely different from the calm and composed woman everyone had known. Under intense questioning, she broke down, revealing the full scope of her involvement in the tragic events. The money wasn't just about financial need, she confessed. It was about paying off debts to dangerous people she'd borrowed from in the past. People who would stop at nothing to collect what was owed. The aunt had been pressured into setting up the deal, but she also revealed something far darker. She knew the buyer personally. In fact, he wasn't just a trafficker. He was a family member of the very people the aunt had been trying to escape. The buyer was a part of an underground criminal network that had been operating in the area for years, using manipulation, fear, and violence to control vulnerable families. The sale of the little girl wasn't a random transaction. It was part of a much larger scheme to prey on people desperate enough to make these kinds of deals. But the most gut-wrenching part of her confession came when she admitted that she hadn't just facilitated the sale. She had been there when the child was handed over, had watched as the buyer took her away. And she hadn't lifted a finger to stop it. The weight of that realization hit everyone in the room like a punch. A family had torn itself apart. A child had lost her life, all because of greed, fear, and the desperation to escape a toxic, criminal world. As the authorities pieced together the final details, the buyer was tracked down to a remote property. But just as they were about to make an arrest, they discovered something truly unexpected. The man was already dead. A note left behind revealed the shocking truth. The criminal network that had been orchestrating these deals was not just involved in trafficking. They were part of an even darker, more dangerous operation, and the man had been silenced, likely to keep him from spilling everything he knew. But who had killed him? And why? In an eerie twist, it was revealed that someone close to the police department, someone who had been investigating the case from the inside, had been feeding information to the criminals all along. This final betrayal opened up a whole new chapter of corruption and deceit. It turned out that the conspiracy wasn't just about the mother and the aunt. It went far deeper, infecting the very people meant to protect the community. The authorities were left with more questions than